Welcome to another reaction video. Today we're going to be reacting to a video that R. Scott Clark made with the Babylon Bee. And I'm really grateful that Scott Clark finally agreed to engage with me, to debate with me. Or maybe he didn't.
So you've been against Christian nationalism. You've come out against Christian nationalism, and I've heard that a lot. I've heard this is a phrase that we're hearing all the time on Twitter and things like that.
I didn't know what it was at first.
Well, no, and that.
Okay, so let's frame this right. If you're against Christian nationalism, you must be in favor of non-Christian nationalism. Let's see if that's the case.
That's what I'm going to ask you. I want to know what your definition of Christian nationalism is, because I honestly, and this is because we may be on the same page, I just don't know, because I'm having a hard time finding a working definition, and I feel like people are throwing it out a lot, and they accuse us of being Christian nationalists here. So.
I've been accused of being a Christian nationalist, and my response was, well, that might be so, but I don't know what it is yet, and so initially my sense was it was a way to make people shut up. So it was a form of bullying, and I don't like bullies, never have.
Yeah, I don't either.
So I pushed back, and not to defend Christian nationalism, but I don't want somebody to use a slogan to shut down discussion or debate or something like that.
But he won't debate with me. He won't discuss anything with me. He blocks me on Twitter. Well, let's carry on.
But if Christian nationalism means that we're going to have a distinctively Christian, theocratic nation, if that's what that means,
like the Westminster Confession wants,
then yeah, I'm against that. I'm an American.
I'm an American. I don't hold to the Westminster Confession.
And I'm a church historian, and so I said.
So put those two things together. Church historian. What did the Westminster Confession say? The original British one, but even the American edited version of the Westminster Confession. Both of those are Christian nationalist documents. And he's a church historian and also an American. Which way does it break?
Show me anywhere in the New Testament where any of the apostles are asking the magistrate to impose Christianity.
Right.
All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go, disciple the nations, baptizing them, teaching them to obey. There's a word there, obey. Teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. You want another one?
You can't do it. It doesn't exist.
I just did it.
The Apostle Paul had multiple opportunities to speak to magistrates, and he never said anything about policy, monetary policy.
The reason he was before the magistrates, the reason he didn't talk about monetary policy is he was there on trial for his life. And he wasn't on trial for his life because he was doing what our modern evangelicals want us to do, a la Romans 13. He was a threat to their empire. When you are going through school, you start in kindergarten, then first grade, then second grade. You don't go right to grad school. Christian thinkers giving advice on monetary policy is grad school. First, you get the kings to bow the knee. First, you get them to do what Paul wanted King Agrippa to do. I wish that all men were like me, including you, Agrippa, except for these chains.
Or Christianity being the established religion. In the second...
Well, there's only one alternative. I don't know where to start. So you've basically got two things. You can have Christianity be the established religion, or you can have some other religion be the established religion. Now, what Clark is saying here is that he wants another religion to be the established religion. How come?
Century, you look at the earliest Christian fathers. Some of them did write to the government. There's an anonymous treatise, I call it Mathetes, the disciple, Mathetes, wrote to a fellow, or gave a speech, almost certainly to a fellow named Diognetus. Diognetus was in the Roman government, and he lays out his case for Christianity. He critiques paganism in the strongest possible terms. He critiques Judaism in very strong terms, and then he lays out his case for Christianity. But he never asks Diognetus to make Christianity the established religion. The only thing we ever said before Constantine was, please quit killing us. We promise we'll behave. We're not, the only thing we're asking is we'd like not to have to swear an oath to Caesar or to pour out an offering to the gods. You've given that privilege to the Jews. You've exempted them. Why won't you exempt us?
Now, if the emperor were to exempt the Christians and say, okay, we're going to stop killing you, the question is, by what standard would they be doing that? When they said, okay, we're going to leave you guys alone, is it a pragmatic standard? Is utilitarianism now the established religion? Is pragmatism the established religion? We know what Clark doesn't want. He doesn't want a theocratic regime, but what does he want? The only choice really is which God is going to be the God of the theocratic regime. Every regime is a theocratic regime. It's not whether, but which. Not whether we have a God, but which God we have.
And eventually we did get that. 311 and then 313, Christianity was made a legal religion.
And was that an improvement or a downgrade? Simple question. Was it a good thing that Constantine quit killing Christians, had the Roman Empire quit killing Christians? Was it a good thing that Constantine ended the public sacrifices to the pagan gods? Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Was that an upgrade or a downgrade? Which?
Under Constantine, Sunday was recognized as a holiday. We got our property back, and that was great. In 381, Theodosius made Christianity the state religion, and that's Christendom. A lot of Americans grew up under sort of the shadows of the end of Christendom, and they miss that, and they want to go back.
Yeah, darn right. Yeah. Why on earth would we want to go back? Maybe so that we could stop killing millions of babies. Maybe so that we wouldn't be sanctifying same-sex marriage. Maybe. Of course, we want to go back.
And they're scared.
No, we're not scared. They should be scared because we're going back.
That's what's really driving this. A lot of what's driving Christian nationalism is a form of unbelief, because they're scared. And I'm old enough to remember the world the way it was. You know, the world's changed pretty dramatically since 2008.
Mm-hmm.
For the better or for the worse? Upgrade or downgrade? Same question as during the time of Constantine. Same question. Has this been an improvement since the sexual revolution of the 60s, or has it been a downgrade? And if it's been a downgrade, why shouldn't we want to go back? If you got the math problem wrong, you need to go back, as C.S. Lewis taught us. You need to go back to the place where you made your mistake and resume from there.
And I remember the 60s and 70s, and the changes we've undergone in the last 10, 12, 15 years are in structural ways, I think, far more dramatic than what happened in the 60s and early 70s.
And good or bad? If they're good, then shouldn't we applaud them? If they're bad, shouldn't we try to undo them? Without fear, of course, without being scared. But the last 15 years, is he applauding? Is he a cheerleader? Does he have the pom-poms out? Or is he lamenting these changes? And if he's lamenting these changes, then why is he opposed to those Christians who want to undo those negative changes?
This is endlessly stimulating. Like I said, stimulating.
It's stimulating when you run around in circles. You need to. It's not stimulating. You're 1 foot nailed to the floor. You can't do this, but they do.
I've got 1,000 thoughts in my head, but now I'll load up another question.
Sure.
So that's helpful. I agree. The Apostle Paul doesn't use his platform when he's on trial a bunch of times at the end of Acts. He doesn't use his platform to enact laws. He evangelizes. He shares his testimony.
He doesn't even invoke his civil rights. Now,
I should let him finish the sentence.
Roman citizen. He had civil rights, but look at the narrative and see when he invokes them. After he's been beaten, after he's been stoned, after he's been jailed, and then he'll say, "Oh, by the way, did you know I'm a Roman citizen?" And as soon as he says that, everybody steps back and says, because that was a very serious crime to abuse a Roman citizen.
Right.
Yeah. So it looks like Paul set a trap, doesn't it? Looks like Paul let them work him over. And then he brings up the fact that he's a Roman citizen so that he has a better case going into court. I wonder.
Right. That put the people who were doing the abuse in jeopardy. He did that intentionally.
Yeah, of course. So
it was strategic.
Yeah.
So he wasn't always invoking his rights. He did invoke his rights, but he invoked his rights in the interest of the advance of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, so he invoked his rights intelligently instead of invoking his rights stupidly. And this is a pattern for us to follow today. We should invoke our rights too, intelligently. We shouldn't invoke our rights stupidly.
Not in the interests of establishing Christianity as the state religion. So
Paul was playing the long game. You don't go into a pagan empire and walk around Rome to figure it out after about a couple hours walk, and then start circulating a clipboard saying, "Would you like to make Christianity the religion of the empire?" When you're playing the long game, you don't conduct the initial stages of the campaign as though they were the final stages of the campaign. Normandy is very, very different than the advance on Berlin.
a friend of mine, Brad Isbell, who has a podcast, Presbycast, I think brilliantly said the whole thing, Christian nationalism, is nothing but cosplay. And that's exactly right. So I'm not even going to debate it anymore, because maybe I should.
I think before you say, I'm not going to debate it anymore, you perhaps ought to debate it maybe once. You're answering questions, and they're softball questions. Why don't you debate it? Why don't you debate it with someone who's an advocate? You're a church historian, you're a Calvinist, you're Reformed, and you're an American. And maybe we can see which one has precedence.
I shouldn't say this, but if I can't say it here, where can I say it? And I've asked people, because we had this discussion on the blog, and I asked one correspondent, I said, what are you going to do with those of us who resist? And he won't answer the question. Right? I'm an American. We have a First Amendment. We have a Second Amendment.
For now, we do, until they are taken away, and he is going to tell us we shouldn't fight to have them restored, because that would be a sign of fear.
Try to force me to be a Baptist, an Episcopalian, a Roman Catholic, right? Because if you want an established church, most likely, given demographic trends in this country, what's most likely to be the established church in 25 years or 30 years or 40 years is going to be Romanism. Is that what you want?
Well, that's a side trail. That's not a big thing. The thing that is really interesting to me is that Clark prides himself on being a confessional Calvinist Reformed theologian. And what he's saying here flies in the face of historic Reformed orthodoxy when it comes to Reformed Protestant political theory. He is not Reformed. I hate to break it to you people, but Scott Clark is not Reformed. If they made him become an Episcopalian, he ought to go along, because that's what he is.
Is that what you want? Right? We fought. I don't think people have any sense of American history.
Oh, never mind.
I don't know if I should say this, but I think it's a fact. We shot people so that the English would not impose bishops on us, in part. We shot Englishmen for a lot of reasons, and Hessians and others.
Yeah.
But that was one of them.
So many reasons.
So
Was that good or bad? I think it was good. The American War for Independence was justified, and it was justified on the principles of Protestant resistance theory, which R. Scott Clark has abandoned.
So what makes people think that this is going to go well now?
Well, okay, so I like your definition is very narrow in that it's the people that are specifically trying to create a state religion.
Is that, because that's...
I don't see it. I don't see that very often, though. I don't see specific
that's what
people
Stephen Wolf's book
doing
is.
it. Yeah. So wait, say it again.
That's what Stephen Wolf's book is advocating, and that's what the Roman integralists are advocating, and so that's what's really on the table. Is, are we going to have an established religion? I mean, there are people who are seriously advocating an established church, and
I don't get tired of saying this. We have an established religion now. It is the religion of secularism, and Clark prefers the religion of secularism to the religion of Christ. But Christ did not tell us to go into all the world and make make the world safe for secularists. He told us to disciple the nations. Now, that happens as a side benefit to create freedoms for non-believers. But we need to understand that it was the Reformed world and life view that created the idea of liberty of conscience, that created the idea of religious liberty. Religious liberty is itself a religious value.
exiling unbelievers, punishing unbelievers, punishing people who are not doctrinally correct.
Well, I agree.
We're doing that now. We're doing that. Is he opposed to what we're doing now? If he's opposed to what we're doing now and he articulates that opposition, then he's going to be called a Christian nationalist.
I agree with you on this. I think this is a hard thing because we live in a pluralistic society.
And we have a constitution.
Athens was a pluralistic society, and Paul walked through Athens, gave it a once-over, and he was grieved in his spirit. Modern Christians aren't grieved. Pluralism is a political name. The theological name is polytheism. The political expression of polytheism is pluralism. And here we have Christians advocating for a polytheistic setup. When we see polytheism, we understand that we live in a polytheistic society, but missionaries, evangelists, pastors, teachers ought to take that as an opportunity. That's the mission. We don't say, oh, we live in a Paul didn't walk through Athens and say, oh, this is a polytheistic town. Let's leave it the way it was. Leave it like you found it. No.
They're proposing a revolution. So this is just cosplay. This is not going to happen. It's just silly.
Yeah. And it is not the biggest danger in the United States.
This is people pretending that something's going to happen that just isn't going to happen.
Speaking of cosplay, we're talking about someone who's pretending to hold to the historic Reformed confessions. This piece is an almost perfect jumble. And what's being ignored is the idea of the inescapable concept, not whether, but which. We can't pretend that what we have now is somehow neutral, and the bad guys have gotten some sort of temporary advantage in an overall neutral setup. That's not what secularism is. Secularism is a virulent, anti-God, anti-Christ religion. And they've got an established foothold. They've got an established church, the public school system, the government school system. They've got an established creed. They've got an established set of ethics, which they impose on everyone. And Clark would prefer that to the Christian alternative.